Hello, I'm Helen Bradley. In this video lesson, I'll show you how to use the Drosti effect filter in Photoshop to create spiral images. This is a starter image that we're going to use, an interesting old clock face. And this is the effect that we're going to create. It's a spiral image created from the clock face. The tools we use to do it are a plugin for Photoshop called Pixel Bender and a filter effect that we download for the plugin. None of these come with Photoshop, but they're free, so let's go now and see where you'll find them and download them from. The Pixel Bender plugin is supplied by Adobe. If you're using Photoshop CS5 or 5.1, you'll come to this Adobe Labs website and download the Pixel Bender plugin for Photoshop CS5 and 5.1. If you're using Photoshop CS4, you'll go to a different site on adobe.com and you'll scroll to the bottom of the page here and download the appropriate Pixel Bender plugin. This is where it can get just a little bit confusing. You need to download the correct plugin or it simply won't work. So you need to determine whether you're using a Mac or a PC. If you're using a Windows PC, whether that's 32-bit or 64-bit. And in some cases you even need to understand whether your Photoshop version is running 32-bit or 64-bit. Just make sure you're clear about that and you download the correct version of Pixel Bender. Luckily, when it comes to the Drosti filter, things are a lot more simple. We'll just go straight to this SubBlue website and download the Drosti effect filter for After Effects and Photoshop CS4. The same filter works in Photoshop CS5 and 5.1. This whole effect can only be achieved if you're using Photoshop CS4, CS5, or 5.1. It doesn't work with earlier versions of Photoshop because there isn't a Pixel Bender download for those versions. Once you've downloaded the files, let's go and see how you would install them. I'm using a PC and here are my downloaded files. The Drosti effect filter is downloaded as a zip file and the Pixel Bender plugin comes down as an MXP file. This is an extension, an Adobe extension file. To install it, you need to run the Adobe Extension Manager. You might be lucky enough to be able to just double-click this file and it will open in the Extension Manager. There is a gotcha though. If you're using Windows Vista or Windows 7, then you need to run the Adobe Extension Manager as an administrator or the files can't be installed in the correct place. So resist the temptation to double-click this and instead go to your Start menu. Locate the Adobe Extension Manager, right-click it and choose Run as Administrator. Then you'll get it to open just like this. Then you'll choose File and Install Extension and go and find your MXP file and install it. We'll come back once mine's installed. I've found now and installed my extension file and it's been installed for Photoshop CS5, the 64-bit version. So far so good. Pixel Bender's installed. Now we need to deal with the Drosti filter. I'm going back to Windows Explorer. I'm going to double click to open this and I'll extract all my files. Having done that, this is the file I'm interested in. It's Drosti PBK. I'm going to copy it. And now I'm going to find my Photoshop folder. This is in my Programs files because it's a 64-bit version. Adobe, Photoshop CS 5.1, 64-bit, and here's my Pixel Bender files folder. If Pixel Bender hasn't installed correctly, you won't have this folder to drop this file into. And we're done. Now I'm ready to close Photoshop and restart it, and let's get working on our image. Here I am back in Photoshop and I've opened the clock image. I'm going to select the crop tool and because I want to crop to a square, I'm going to hold the Shift key as I drag over the image. Then I'm going to position the crop so that the clock is in the middle. I actually want it even a little bit more accurate, the position than that. So I'm going to size it down a little bit, make sure it's dead center and double click. Now before we can use the Drosty filter, we need to check the size of this image. So I'm going to choose Image and then Image Size, and it's 2684 pixels square. Now I'll launch Pixel Bender and the Drosty filter. I'll choose Filter, Pixel Bender Gallery. Pixel Bender opens by default with the Circle Splash filter. I'm just going to select Drosty from the drop-down list here. The first thing to do when running the Drosty filter is to type the size of your image. There's no way to ascertain the size of an image from inside the Pixel Bender plugin, so you need to check it before you come in. That's just why we did that. I've typed in the width and height here, and now you can see we're getting the classic spiral image. But I want my spiral to have round edges, not these sort of square angular edges. So to do that, I'm going to scroll down here and locate the Transparent Inside checkbox, and I'm going to click it to disable it. Transparent Inside controls those square edges, so now we have round edges. From here, all we need to do is to determine what we want our spiral to look like, and all the features or all the sliders for that are up here. Radius inside, radius outside, periodicity, strands, and strand mirror. I'm going to start with strands. The strand is this spiral here, and at the moment it's set to 1, but we can increase that to 2 or 3 or 4, and each time we do, we get an additional strand for our spiral. As you can see here, the number 4 is appearing at the very edges of each of these spirals. If I click Strand Mirror, that's no longer going to be the case, and we get a more interesting result on our spirals, not quite the same on each one of them. So you can use Strand Mirror, enable it or disable it as desired. I think I want it enabled, so I'm going to leave it enabled, but I'm going to decrease the number of strands. Periodicity is how many times the clock face is repeated on a single curl of this strand. So if I increase the periodicity, you'll find that we get lots more numbers on our curls, and if I decrease it, we get less. 1 is the default, so I'm going to increase it a little bit, but not a lot. Radius outside and radius inside control these spirals. So if I increase this, we're getting a tighter curl. If I decrease it, we get a looser curl, down to practically no curl at all. The default here is 25, so I'm going to wind it up a little higher than that value. When we adjust the radius outside slider, we're going to affect this brown area. The default is 100, which is the highest value. If we decrease it, you'll see the brown area will begin to disappear until it's completely gone. Now I want it to be there, and I want a good spread of this brown area, so I'm going to leave it set at its 100 value. Once you've got your spiral looking the way you want it to look, all you need to do is to click OK to render the image and return to Photoshop. Let's see now how far we've come. This is the original clock image that we cropped to a square, making sure that the center of the clock is in the center of the crop. Then we applied the Drosty effect filter to the image using the Pixel Bender plugin. And this is the result, an interesting spiral effect on our image. You can use the Drosty filter with absolutely any image, and it doesn't have to be cropped to square. But you will find in particular that circular images with some interesting border around them work very, very well in this filter. When you're working with the Drosty filter, have a look too at the settings at the very bottom of the filter. We didn't explore those, but there's one called Hyper Drosty that if you check the checkbox and then adjust the settings below it, you can create some fascinating fractal type effects for your images. And I'm going to leave you to explore that all by yourself. For now, I'm Helen Bradley. Thank you for joining me for this video tutorial.